I'm Pauline, 35 years old, and I was standing in that Boston divorce courtroom, my hands trembling as my husband Marcus laughed with pure victory. He had just finished presenting his case for why he deserved everything we'd built together. The house, the cars, and most terrifyingly full custody of our daughter. His lawyer had painted me as an unstable, unemployed mother who couldn't provide properly for a child. My 8-year-old Emma sat silently beside me, clutching her worn backpack. Then suddenly she stood up, pulling out her father's old iPad. "Judge, I have something you need to hear," she said clearly. "Before I reveal what was on that recording that changed everything, let me know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see how one brave little girl brought justice to this courtroom. The truth Emma uncovered will absolutely shock you. Let me take you back 12 years to understand how we got to this moment. I met Marcus at Henderson and Associates, a prestigious law firm in downtown Boston, where I worked as a legal assistant. I was 23, fresh out of college with a degree in communications and dreams of maybe going to law school myself one day. Marcus was 28, a junior associate with perfectly styled dark hair and suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He pursued me with the kind of intensity that made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. Flowers delivered to my desk every Monday. Surprise lunch dates at expensive restaurants I could never afford. Weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, where he'd rent beautiful beachfront cottages. My friends warned me about dating someone from work, especially a lawyer who was clearly headed for partnership track. But Marcus had this way of making me feel special, chosen, like I was essential to his success. We married 2 years later in a ceremony that his parents mostly paid for. 400 guests at the Four Seasons, a reception that probably cost more than most people's houses. My parents, simple folks from Worcester, looked completely overwhelmed. My mother pulled me aside during the reception and whispered that she hoped I knew what I was getting into. I assured her that Marcus loved me, that we were building something amazing together. The first few years were everything I'd dreamed. Marcus encouraged me to leave my job at the firm, said it would look better for his career if I wasn't working at the same company. He was making good money. He said enough for both of us. I could pursue my passion for graphic design, maybe start freelancing from home. It seemed like the perfect arrangement. When Emma came along 3 years into our marriage, I thought our happiness was complete. Marcus seemed thrilled to have a daughter. He bought the most expensive crib designer baby clothes, enrolled her in music classes before she could even walk. He'd parade her around his office, showing her off to the senior partners. "Look at my beautiful girl," he'd say. Though I started noticing he meant it more as a reflection of himself than actual pride in Emma. As Marcus climbed the corporate ladder, things began shifting in ways so subtle I almost didn't notice. He started working late every night, leaving before Emma woke up and returning after she went to bed. Saturdays became office days. Sundays were for golf with clients. When I mentioned feeling lonely, he'd remind me how hard he was working for our family, for our future. The house in Brookline, the Range Rover in the garage, Emma's private preschool, all of it required sacrifice, he said. I started taking on freelance design projects from home, just small things to keep my skills sharp and have something that was mine. Marcus would look at my computer setup in the corner of our bedroom with barely concealed disdain. "Playing with your little pictures again," he'd say, not quite joking. When I landed a decent contract with a local restaurant chain to redesign their menus, he actually laughed. "Cute hobby, babe, but let's not pretend it's a real career." The financial control started gradually, too. First, he suggested handling all the bills since he was better with numbers. Then our joint account became his primary account that he'd transfer allowance from. By year 7, I had to ask for money to buy groceries. He'd review receipts, question purchases. Why did Emma need new shoes already? Couldn't I find cheaper produce? Meanwhile, his suits got more expensive. His car got upgraded every 2 years. Emma adored her father despite his absence. The rare Saturdays he'd take her out were like Christmas to her. They'd go to the aquarium, the science museum, fancy lunches at places that served $50 kids' meals. She'd come home chattering about Daddy's friend who joined them, always a different woman from his office he'd describe as a colleague showing interest in family life for her own future planning. The first real sign I couldn't ignore was the perfume. Not my perfume, something floral and young clinging to his jacket when he'd toss it on our bed after another late night. When I mentioned it, he had an instant explanation. New secretary wore too much fragrance, practically choked the whole elevator. Then came the lipstick on his collar, faint but definitely there. Another explanation about a grateful client who got emotional after winning her case. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Emma needed her family intact. 6 months before everything exploded, the distance between us had become an ocean. We were roommates sharing a house, co-parents who barely spoke except about logistics. When was Emma's parent-teacher conference? Did I pay the electric bill? Could I handle dinner alone again because he had client entertainment? The man who once couldn't go a day without telling me he loved me now looked through me like I was furniture. I threw myself into my freelance work, landing bigger clients, actually making decent money for the first time in years. But every success I had seemed to irritate Marcus more. He'd make snide comments about my little business ventures when his colleagues came for dinner. Pauline thinks she's an entrepreneur now, he'd say, with that particular tone that made everyone uncomfortable. The earthquake that shattered our marriage came on a Tuesday morning 6 months ago. I was working on a logo design when Marcus walked into my office space, what used to be Emma's playroom that I'd converted when she outgrew it. He stood in the doorway like a stranger, his face completely emotionless. "We need to talk," he said, and I knew before he said another word that my world was about to collapse. "I want a divorce," he announced like he was stating the weather forecast. No emotion, no explanation, just that flat declaration. When I asked why, he launched into a prepared speech that sounded like something his lawyer had coached him to say. We'd grown apart. I'd become obsessed with my little design projects instead of supporting his career. I was emotionally unavailable. The marriage had been dead for years, and he was finally brave enough to admit it. But the real cruelty came when he laid out his plan. He'd already consulted with Patricia Blackwood, the most ruthless divorce attorney in Boston, a woman known for destroying spouses in court. He'd already moved money around, already started documenting every hour I spent working, instead of with Emma, every time our elderly neighbor Dorothy watched her every school event he attended while I was meeting with clients. "You'll get nothing," he said with this cold smile I'd never seen before. "The house is in my name, bought with my income. The car's the savings. All of it came from my work while you played artist. And Emma, well, she needs stability. A father with a real career, not a mother who prioritizes her hobby over her child." I felt the floor disappear beneath me. This man who I'd loved for 12 years, who I'd given up my career for, who I'd supported through law school stress and partnership pressure, was now treating me like an enemy to be crushed. Where was the Marcus who cried when Emma was born, who promised we'd grow old together on that beach in Martha's Vineyard? The next months were a calculated campaign of destruction. Marcus's lawyer filed motion after motion. Requests for financial records I didn't have because Marcus had always handled them. Depositions where they twisted every moment of our marriage. The time I went to a design conference in New York became abandonment. The nights I worked late on projects became neglect. They even subpoenaed Dorothy, our 72-year-old neighbor, trying to prove I dumped Emma on her constantly. Poor Dorothy, a widow who'd lost her own daughter in a car accident years ago, had become like family to us. She'd watch Emma maybe once a week when I had client meetings, always refusing payment, saying Emma's laughter was payment enough. Now she was being dragged into court documents painted as evidence of my inadequate mothering. The legal bills started mounting immediately. The lawyer I could afford, Harold Morrison, was a kind man in his 70s who mostly handled simple divorces, not the kind of warfare Marcus had declared. Harold did his best, but watching him go up against Patricia Blackwood was like watching a kindergarten teacher fight a Navy SEAL. Every court appearance left me more hopeless. Marcus, meanwhile, had started his psychological campaign with Emma. Those weekend outings became more frequent and more elaborate. Trips to Cape Cod, skiing in Vermont, always just him and Emma, and sometimes a friend from work. He'd bought her an iPad, something I'd said she was too young for, and filled it with games and movies. He'd let her stay up late, eat whatever she wanted, buy her gifts I could never afford. The change in Emma broke my heart. My chatty open daughter became quiet and withdrawn at home. She'd spend hours on that iPad headphones and barely responding when I tried to talk to her. When she came back from weekends with Marcus, she'd go straight to her room. Once I heard her on the phone with him saying "yes, Daddy," over and over, then looking at me with something like suspicion. The worst moment came when Emma returned from a weekend at Cape Cod with Marcus. She walked in the door, looked at me with these cold little eyes, and asked Mom, "What's a homewrecker?" My blood froze. "Where did you hear that word, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She shrugged, said she heard it somewhere, couldn't remember. But I knew. Marcus was poisoning her against me, and I had no idea how to stop it. Harold tried to document my relationship with Emma. Report cards showing I'd never missed a parent-teacher conference until the separation. Medical records proving I'd taken her to every doctor's appointment, stayed up with her through every fever. Photos of us at the park, the library, the museums on our modest mother-daughter outings. But it all looked so small compared to Marcus's expensive adventures. The financial manipulation was surgical. Marcus had apparently been planning this for at least a year. Money had been moved to accounts I didn't know existed. Bonuses disappeared. Investment returns vanished. On paper, it looked like we had far less than I knew we should. But proving financial manipulation required forensic accountants I couldn't afford. I took on more freelance projects, working until 3 or 4 in the morning after Emma went to bed. I redesigned websites, created marketing materials, anything to pay Harold's fees and keep us afloat. But Marcus used this against me too. See, Patricia would argue in court, she prioritizes work over her daughter. She's unstable, obsessed with building this so-called career instead of focusing on Emma's needs. 2 weeks before the final divorce hearing, I was at my lowest. Marcus had convinced the court to give him temporary primary custody, claiming my work schedule was erratic and harmful to Emma. I got her weekends and Wednesday nights. My own daughter had become a visitor in my life. The house felt empty, her room too quiet, her absence a physical ache in my chest. The weeks leading up to the final hearing were torture. Harold did his best to prepare me, but we both knew we were walking into an execution. Patricia Blackwood had won dozens of cases like mine, crushing wives who'd sacrificed careers for their families. She had a gift for making stay-at-home mothers look like lazy parasites, and working mothers look like neglectful monsters. Marcus had strategically scheduled the hearing for a Thursday, knowing it would be harder for me to arrange childcare on a school day. But Dorothy, bless her heart, insisted on coming to court with us. "That child needs her mama," she said firmly, "and I'm going to make sure she has you when this is over." I barely slept the night before. Emma was staying with me for my Wednesday night visitation, and she seemed different, anxious in a way that worried me. She kept checking her backpack, making sure her iPad was there, the one Marcus had given her that she carried everywhere now. When I tucked her in, she clung to me longer than she had in months. "Mom." "I know Daddy's secret," she whispered against my shoulder. My heart stopped. "What secret, baby?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She pulled back, looked at me with these serious eyes that seemed too old for her 8 years. "The secret about Lisa, about the money, about sending you away." Before I could ask more, she shook her head. "I'll tell everyone tomorrow. I promise." I wanted to press her for details, but something in her expression stopped me. She looked scared but determined, like a little soldier preparing for battle. I kissed her forehead, told her everything would be okay, though I had no idea what she meant or what tomorrow would bring. That night Marcus called. His voice had that fake concern he'd perfected. "Just wanted to make sure you're prepared for tomorrow," he said. "I know this is hard, but it's what's best for Emma. She needs stability, Pauline. Once you accept that, maybe we can work out some visitation. Supervised, of course, until you get your priorities straight." The casual cruelty of it made me sick. This man who'd once promised to protect me, to cherish me, was now treating me like an unfit stranger who needed supervision to see her own child. I hung up without responding, afraid of what I might say, afraid it would be used against me in court. I spent the rest of the night reviewing my documentation, though I knew it was futile. Bank statements showing the little money I'd managed to save. Character references from Emma's teachers saying what a devoted mother I was. Photos of Emma and me at her school plays her soccer games, the science fair, where we'd built a volcano that actually won third place. Harold called early the next morning with bad news. Patricia had filed a last-minute motion with new evidence that I was an unstable parent. Photos of Emma at Dorothy's house taken by a private investigator Marcus had hired. Time-stamped documentation of the nights I'd worked late while Emma was asleep. Even a statement from the barista at the coffee shop, where I sometimes met clients saying I looked stressed and overwhelmed. The noose was tightening. Every normal part of my life as a working mother was being twisted into evidence of neglect. Meanwhile, Marcus's absence from Emma's life for years was being reframed as responsible breadwinning. The system wasn't just broken, it was being weaponized against me. As we dressed for court that morning, Emma was strangely calm. She wore her favorite purple dress, the one I'd bought her for her birthday, not the designer outfit Marcus had sent over for the occasion. She carefully placed her iPad in her backpack, checking the battery, making sure the volume was up. When I asked if she was okay, she squeezed my hand and said something that broke my heart. "Don't worry, Mommy. I know what Daddy did is wrong." The ride to court was silent except for Dorothy humming softly in the back seat, some old hymn about justice and mercy. Emma sat between us, her backpack clutched on her lap, staring straight ahead with this fierce concentration. I wanted to protect her from all of this, to somehow shield her from the ugliness of what her parents had become. But she seemed to have her own mission, her own purpose I didn't yet understand. As we walked up the courthouse steps, Marcus was already there with Patricia, looking confident and expensive. He was wearing his best suit, the charcoal one I'd helped him pick for his partnership announcement. Patricia looked like a shark in Chanel, all sharp edges and predatory smiles. They were laughing about something, probably their assured victory. Marcus's expression changed when he saw Emma. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Maybe guilt, maybe concern. But then he rearranged his features into that fake, worried father expression he'd been perfecting. He walked over, bent down to Emma's level. "Hey, Princess, you doing okay? This will all be over soon, and then we can go get ice cream, just you and me." Emma looked at him steadily, didn't smile, didn't respond. She just adjusted her backpack straps and walked past him into the courthouse. Marcus straightened, shot me a look that blamed me for Emma's coldness. "See what you've done?" his eyes seemed to say. Turned her against her own father. If only he knew what was coming. If only any of us knew how the next 2 hours would change everything. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate, which somehow made it worse. Every sound echoed, every whisper carried. Judge Catherine Morrison presided, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back severely and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She had a reputation for being fair but tough, especially in custody cases. Patricia Blackwood opened with theatrical precision. She painted Marcus as a devoted father who'd worked tirelessly to provide for his family while I'd frittered away my time on amateur design projects. She presented financial records showing Marcus's annual income of $350,000 versus my inconsistent freelance earnings that barely reached $30,000 last year. The assets were laid out like a feast of my failures. The Brookline house worth $800,000 purchased entirely with Marcus's income. The investment accounts totaling $500,000 all in Marcus's name because I'd never contributed enough to matter. The cars, the vacation home rental contracts in the Hamptons, even Emma's college fund, all attributed solely to Marcus's hard work and financial acumen. Then came the character assassination. Patricia presented her evidence with surgical precision. Photos of Emma at Dorothy's house at various times, implying I regularly abandoned my daughter. Screenshots of my social media showing me at networking events, because apparently trying to build my business meant I was neglecting my child. Even emails to clients sent late at night twisted to suggest I prioritized work over family. Marcus took the stand with practiced perfection. He spoke softly, sadly about how our marriage had deteriorated. how I'd become obsessed with my career aspirations, leaving him to handle all of Emma's real needs. He actually managed to squeeze out a tear when he talked about the nights he'd come home to find Emma doing homework alone while I was locked in my office on conference calls. The lies came so easily to him. He claimed I'd refused marriage counseling when he'd been the one to say therapy was for weak people. He said I'd been emotionally distant for 2 years when he'd been the one sleeping in the guest room. He painted himself as a long-suffering husband who'd finally had enough, who just wanted what was best for his daughter. When he mentioned this time Emma had gotten sick at school and I'd been in a client meeting unable to answer my phone immediately, he shook his head sadly. "She called me, Your Honor," he said. "An 8-year-old girl burning with fever, and her mother was too busy with her little design projects to answer. I left a partnership meeting to get her. That's the difference between us." What he didn't mention was that I'd been in that meeting for exactly 15 minutes, that I'd called back immediately, that I'd rushed to school, and spent the next 3 days nursing Emma through the flu while he went to his conference in Chicago. But Harold didn't have the documents to prove it, and my word meant nothing against Marcus's carefully crafted narrative. Patricia called character witnesses next. Marcus's secretary testified about what a devoted father he was, always talking about Emma keeping her pictures on his desk. His golf buddy mentioned how Marcus had given up important tournaments to attend Emma's recitals, though I knew for a fact Marcus had missed most of them. Even the private investigator took the stand, detailing my suspicious meetings at coffee shops, my late-night work sessions, the concerning amount of time Emma spent with our elderly neighbor. Through it all, Emma sat perfectly still beside me, her backpack at her feet, her hands folded in her lap. She watched her father lie with an expression I couldn't read. Harold whispered that we'd have our turn soon, but we both knew our evidence looked pathetic compared to this orchestrated destruction. When Harold finally stood to present our case, his voice seemed thin after Patricia's commanding presence. He submitted Emma's report cards, showing consistent parental involvement. He presented statements from teachers praising my dedication. He even had Dorothy take the stand, where she tearfully explained that she loved watching Emma, that I never took advantage, that I was a wonderful mother doing her best. But Patricia destroyed everything on cross-examination. She made Dorothy admit she had no formal childcare training. She pointed out that my involvement in school activities had decreased since the separation, failing to mention that Marcus had changed the emergency contact information, and I wasn't being notified of events. She even suggested that my freelance work was a form of addiction, an obsession that prevented me from being fully present as a mother. Judge Morrison listened to everything with that same neutral expression, occasionally making notes, giving nothing away. After 2 hours of testimony, she called a brief recess to review the financial documents. Marcus and Patricia looked confident, already discussing asset division in whispers. Harold patted my hand, told me we'd done our best, but his eyes were already apologizing for the loss. That's when Emma stood up. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and strong. "May I please speak? I have something very important you need to hear." The courtroom went completely silent. Judge Morrison looked surprised, then concerned. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "this is a proceeding for adults. I know this must be very hard for you." Emma didn't back down. She stood straighter, lifted her chin in a gesture I recognized as pure determination. "Your Honor, I have evidence on this iPad that you need to hear. It's about my dad and what he's been planning." Marcus jumped to his feet, his face draining of color. "Emma, honey." "Sit down right now," he commanded, but his voice cracked with panic. "This isn't appropriate." "Your Honor, she's just a child. She doesn't understand what's happening here." Patricia was already objecting, citing procedural rules, but Judge Morrison raised her hand for silence. She studied Emma for a long moment. "How old are you, Emma?" she asked. 8 years and 4 months, Emma replied. "And what is this evidence you want to share?" Emma reached into her backpack, pulled out the iPad with steady hands. "It's recordings, Your Honor. Recordings I made of my dad when he didn't know I was listening. About his girlfriend Lisa and the money he hid, and his plan to make my mom disappear." The word girlfriend hit the courtroom like a bomb. Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Patricia grabbed his arm, whispering furiously, Harold looked as shocked as everyone else. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what was happening. Judge Morrison made a decision. I'll allow it, she said firmly. Bailiff, please connect the device to the court's audio system. Patricia objected loudly about admissibility, about privacy laws, about the manipulation of a minor. But Judge Morrison cut her off. Ms. Blackwood, if there's nothing concerning in these recordings, then there's no harm in listening. If there is, then this court needs to hear it. Emma navigated to her voice memos app with the confidence of a generation raised on technology. The first recording was dated 3 months ago. She pressed play, and Marcus's voice filled the courtroom, clear and unmistakable. Yeah, Lisa, once this divorce is finalized, we can stop sneaking around, Marcus's recorded voice said. There was a woman's laugh, young and flirtatious. I can't wait, baby. I'm so tired of pretending to be just your paralegal. Marcus laughed too. Just a few more months. Pauline is so clueless she has no idea what's coming. My lawyer says she'll be lucky to get supervised visitation by the time we're done. The courtroom erupted. Patricia was on her feet, objecting. Marcus was shouting about illegal recordings, about editing, about manipulation. But Judge Morrison banged her gavel hard. Order. We will listen to all of it. Continue, Emma. The next recording was even worse. It was from one of those weekends at Cape Cod, and you could hear the ocean in the background. Marcus was on the phone, slightly drunk from the sound of it. The offshore accounts are all set up, he was saying. $2.3 million transferred through the Cayman Islands subsidiary. Completely untraceable. Pauline's idiot lawyer will never find it. The man's voice on the other end was asking about tax implications. Marcus laughed. That's the beauty of it. On paper, I'm practically broke. The house is mortgaged to the hilt through shell companies. The cars are leased through the firm. By the time we go to court, it'll look like I'm barely keeping us afloat. Meanwhile, Lisa and I will be set for life. Emma clicked to the next recording. This one was in a restaurant. You could hear dishes clanking, other conversations in the background. Lisa's voice was clearer in this one. What about Emma? She asked. Marcus's response made my blood run cold. She'll adjust. Kids are resilient. Once Pauline is out of the picture, Emma will forget about her. We'll move to California like we planned. Fresh start. New family. Maybe give Emma a little brother or sister, someone who actually matters. Emma's voice came through, neck small and hurt. But Daddy, I matter, don't I? There was a rustling then, Marcus's panicked voice. Emma, I didn't see you there, princess. Of course you matter. You matter more than anything. Then why did you say that? Emma's voice asked. Marcus stuttered, made excuses, said she misunderstood that grown-up conversations were complicated. But Emma had more. Recording after recording. Marcus discussing how he'd hidden bonuses, funneled money through fake consulting fees, even sold some of my jewelry and pocketed the cash. Lisa featured prominently, their 3-year affair documented in casual conversations about their future together, their plans to honeymoon in Bali, once the divorce was final, how they'd redecorate the Brookline house once I was gone. The most damaging recording was the most recent from just a week ago. Marcus was coaching Lisa on her potential testimony. If they call you as a witness, you say you've only ever seen me being a devoted father. You've observed Pauline being neglectful, distracted, possibly drinking. Lisa protested. But I've never even met her. Marcus's voice turned cold. Doesn't matter. It's about creating reasonable doubt about her fitness as a mother. Patricia says if we can suggest mental health issues or substance abuse, even without proof, it plants seeds. Judge Morrison had heard enough. She ordered a recess, demanded all devices be submitted for forensic verification. Marcus tried to approach Emma, but she pressed against me, trembling now that her bravery had been spent. Don't let him near me, Mommy, she whispered. He scares me now. The recess lasted 2 hours. During that time, court IT specialists verified the recordings were authentic, unedited with metadata, proving the dates and times. They found more than just the recordings. Emma had taken photos too. Lisa in our house while I was at work. Lisa wearing my grandmother's necklace, the one Marcus said was lost. Lisa and Marcus kissing in his car outside Emma's school. But the real bombshell came when the forensic accountant hastily called in by Judge Morrison traced the financial trails Marcus had mentioned. The offshore accounts were real. The shell companies were real. The systematic hiding of assets over 3 years was real. Marcus hadn't just been planning to divorce me. He'd been planning to destroy me while enriching himself by millions. When court reconvened, Patricia Blackwood did something I'd never seen before. She stood and formally withdrew as Marcus's counsel, citing irreconcilable differences with her client's presentation of facts. In plain English, she'd been lied to, made a fool of, and she was done. Marcus sat alone at his table, his perfect facade finally cracked, revealing the ugly truth beneath. Lisa was located and brought to court within the hour. Faced with potential charges of conspiracy and fraud, she broke down completely. She admitted to the affair, admitted to the plans, even admitted that Marcus had promised to put her through law school with the money he was hiding from me. She was 26, naive, in love with her boss, who'd promised her the world. Now she sat crying in the witness stand, realizing she'd helped destroy a family for a man who'd probably have discarded her eventually too. Judge Morrison didn't even need to deliberate. Her verdict was swift and brutal. The divorce was granted, but not how Marcus had planned. Judge Morrison's voice filled the courtroom with an authority that made everyone sit straighter. "Mr. Henderson," she began, looking directly at Marcus, "in my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a calculated, cruel attempt to manipulate the legal system for personal gain. You have not only hidden substantial assets, but have attempted to alienate a child from her mother through psychological manipulation and parental alienation." She turned to her notes, adjusting her glasses. "Based on the evidence presented, particularly the recordings and financial documentation provided, I am ruling as follows. The marital home in Brookline, currently valued at $800,000, will be transferred entirely to Mrs. Henderson. The court finds that Mr. Henderson's fraudulent activity and breach of fiduciary duty negates any claim to shared property." Marcus started to stand, but one look from the judge sat him back down. His face had gone from pale to an alarming shade of red. His hands shook as he gripped the edge of the table. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, "The forensic accounting has revealed hidden assets totaling approximately $2.3 million. These funds will be immediately frozen and transferred to Mrs. Henderson as both compensatory and punitive damages for the attempted fraud. The court also orders Mr. Henderson to pay monthly alimony of $8,000 and child support of $5,000 to be automatically deducted from his wages." She wasn't done. The investment accounts, the vehicles, the vacation properties, everything that Marcus had claimed as his sole property, due to being the primary earner, all of it was either transferred to me or ordered to be liquidated with proceeds going to me. The judge noted that my sacrificing my career to support Marcus's ambitions constituted substantial contribution to the accumulation of these assets. But the custody ruling was what mattered most. The court awards sole physical and legal custody to Mrs. Henderson, Judge Morrison announced. Mr. Henderson will have supervised visitation only 2 hours every other Saturday, pending completion of a full psychological evaluation and parenting classes. The court finds that Mr. Henderson has engaged in severe parental alienation and emotional abuse that makes unsupervised contact potentially harmful to the minor child. Emma squeezed my hand so tight I thought she might break it. Tears were streaming down both our faces, but for the first time in months, they were tears of relief, of joy, of justice finally served. The judge addressed Emma directly then. "Young lady," she said, with the first smile I'd seen from her, "you showed remarkable courage today. No child should have to bear the burden you've carried, but you've protected your mother and yourself with a bravery that adults twice your age couldn't muster. This court owes you a debt of gratitude for bringing the truth to light." Then Judge Morrison did something unexpected. She ordered an immediate investigation into Patricia Blackwood's practice, noting that while Patricia might not have known about the fraud initially, her aggressive tactics and apparent willingness to present false narratives about mental health and substance abuse without evidence warranted professional review. "As for you, Mr. Henderson," the judge's voice turned ice cold, This court is referring your case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges including fraud, perjury, hidden assets in a divorce proceeding, and conspiracy. You may want to retain a criminal defense attorney. A very good one. The gavel came down with finality. Court dismissed. The aftermath was immediate and chaotic. Marcus tried to approach us, but the bailiff stepped between us. "Stay away from them, Mr. Henderson," he warned. "You heard the judge. Supervised visitation only." Marcus looked at Emma with desperate eyes. "Princess, you don't understand what you've done." Emma lifted her chin, looking so much older than 8. "I saved my mommy from you. That's what I did." Harold, who'd been silent through the entire revelation, suddenly seemed 20 years younger. He shook his head in amazement, then swept Emma up in a grandfatherly hug. "You brilliant, brave little girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You just taught this old lawyer something about justice." Within a week, the dominoes started falling. Marcus's law firm, Henderson and Associates, launched an internal investigation that revealed he'd been overbilling clients and misusing company funds. He was immediately terminated and disbarred pending a full ethics review. His reputation, so carefully cultivated over years, crumbled in days. Lisa faced her own consequences. The firm fired her for violating company policy about relationships with superiors and for her role in the financial deception. Last I heard, she'd moved back to her parents' house in Connecticut. Her dreams of law school funded by stolen money evaporated. The financial recovery was swift. The frozen accounts were transferred to me within a month. The house deed was changed to my name alone. Suddenly, after years of having to ask permission to buy groceries, I had resources I'd never dreamed of. But more importantly, I had my freedom and my daughter. I used some of the money to establish my design business properly. I rented a real office space in Cambridge, hired 2 assistants, and within 3 months had more clients than I could handle. It turns out that my little hobby was actually a substantial talent that had been suppressed for years. My income quadrupled within 6 months. Emma started therapy to deal with everything she'd witnessed and endured. The therapist was amazed at her resilience, but also concerned about the burden she'd carried. We learned that Emma had started recording Marcus months ago after she'd overheard him on a call saying he needed to get rid of me. She'd been terrified he meant something worse than divorce, so she'd started documenting everything protecting me the only way an 8-year-old could think of. Dorothy became an even bigger part of our lives. She joined us for dinners, holidays, became the grandmother Emma had never really had. She told me once that watching our justice unfold had restored her faith in the universe's ability to right wrongs. 6 months after the divorce, I received a letter from Marcus. He was living in a small apartment in Worcester, working at a legal aid clinic for a fraction of his former salary, the only job he could get with his ethics violations pending. He wrote that he was sorry that he'd lost himself in greed and ambition, that he knew he'd destroyed everything good in his life. I didn't respond. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. Emma asked to see him once during a supervised visit at a family center. She wanted to tell him something, she said. I watched through the observation window as she sat across from him, this man who'd been her hero and then her villain. "I understand now why you did what you did, Daddy," she said calmly. "You loved money, and Lisa more than you loved Mommy and me. That's sad for you because we were your real treasure, and now you've lost us forever." Marcus broke down crying, but Emma didn't comfort him. She simply stood up, walked to the door, and never asked to see him again. A year later, our lives had found a new rhythm. My business was thriving with a team of 5 designers and contracts with major retailers. Emma was flourishing in school, her anxiety gone, her natural joy returned. We'd even gotten a dog, a golden retriever named Justice, though Emma just called him Justy. One evening as I tucked Emma into bed, she asked me a question that stopped my heart. "Mom, do you think you'll ever get married again?" I sat on her bed, brushing her hair back from her face. "I don't know, sweetheart. Would that be okay with you if I did someday?" She thought about it seriously, then nodded. "Only if he's kind to you. Only if he sees how amazing you are. Only if he knows that we're a package deal." I hugged her tight, this brave, brilliant little girl who'd saved us both. We are definitely a package deal, I agreed. Looking back now, I realized that Marcus's cruelty had actually freed us. His attempt to destroy me had instead revealed my strength. His lies had taught Emma the value of truth. His greed had shown us that real wealth isn't money, but the love between a mother and daughter who fought for each other when the world tried to tear them apart. The house in Brookline, once a symbol of Marcus's success, became our sanctuary of peace. I converted his home office into an art studio for Emma. She loves to paint, especially butterflies emerging from cocoons. Transformation, she says, is the most beautiful thing in nature. Sometimes when I pass the courthouse on my way to client meetings, I remember that day when everything changed. The day my 8-year-old daughter stood up to her father armed with nothing but an iPad and the truth. The day justice prevailed, not through expensive lawyers or legal tricks, but through the pure courage of a child who refused to let her mother be erased. Marcus was wrong about one thing above all others. He said Emma would forget about me, would move on, would adjust. He underestimated the bond between us, the fierce love of a daughter for her mother. That love was stronger than his lies, more powerful than his money, more enduring than his schemes. And that love, that unbreakable bond between Emma and me, that's the real victory. The money, the house, the business success, those are all just extras. The true triumph is that we're together, we're whole, and we're free. Emma saved me in that courtroom, but in truth, we saved each other. And that's a love story worth more than all the offshore accounts in the world. The truth really does set you free, even when it comes from the voice of an 8-year-old girl brave enough to press record. What would you have done in my situation? Could you have found the strength to fight back when everything seemed lost? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories of triumph over betrayal. Share this with someone who needs to hear that justice is possible, even when all seems lost. Thank you for listening to our journey, and remember, sometimes our greatest champions come in the smallest packages. May you find your own strength and your own voice just as Emma helped me find mine.